Hey everybody, welcome to the Conscious Love Show. Whether you are single, you are in a relationship, or you're healing a broken heart, this show is here to inspire you, to remind you how beautiful, lovable, and amazing you truly are, and to give you the practical tools and insights to navigate from wherever you are right now to the loving relationship that you so deeply want to have. My name is Shane Kohler. I'm a certified transformational coach and trainer with over a decade experience helping people release their trauma and open their hearts to love. I've delivered seminars all over the world, coached thousands of people through my online platforms and programs, and every week I'm coming straight to you with the hottest insights and the best teachers around, bringing you powerful resources and profound conversations to heal your relationship with love, dating, and yourself. I'm so grateful you're here, and if it's your first time, welcome. You can count on me to always show up for you with my very best and a commitment to learn and grow myself so I can serve you to my maximum ability. Thanks so much for tuning into the show. I've got some awesome things planned for you today. So without further ado, let's dive in. All right. Hello, everybody. Hello. Welcome back to another episode of the Conscious Love Show podcast. Shane Kohler here. Pleasure to be back with you. First episode of 2025. Some of you who listen regularly may have noticed I took a little break for the last couple of weeks. So I'm back. I'm energized. I had my holidays and I'm excited to dive in with everybody in the new year. I hope you're excited to be here too. I hope you have some clear intentions for what you want to create, bring into your life this year. And I look forward to supporting you in that this year, right? Whatever your dreams are, whatever you want to manifest, I hope to be your partner and your teammate on that journey. And I hope that this podcast can be something that supports that. And so today's episode is titled Reclaim Your Energy, How to Stop Chasing and Start Attracting in 2025. And what I really want to do in today's episode as we welcome in the new year, what I want to do is go kind of back to basics, right? Go back to some energetic basics, some basics of masculine and feminine energy, and really talking about how do we manifest? How do we attract? How do we create? And I think these are, it's important to revisit this, right? It's important to kind of check in with this because we get lost. We get lost in our desires. We get lost in our motivations. We get lost in fear and will it happen or won't it happen? And when is it going to happen? And why hasn't it happened yet? And all of this kind of stuff just ends up taking over and we get lost in it. And so I think it's really important, especially as we enter into something like a new year, which, for me, it's like, I always thought of the new year as like a fresh start. Right? It's like, okay, I let the old year go, whatever worked, whatever didn't work, whatever I succeeded at, whatever I failed at. It's like I come to terms with all of it. I release it. I let it go. And I start the new year fresh, right? Clear intention, clear motivation. And I start from a clean place. And I think the new year, really we could do that anytime, but I think the new year is such a great time to do that. And I think so many of us are doing that collectively, right? So there's a lot of energy behind that. And so in light of that and in that spirit, I wanted to go back to some of the basics here and talk about the energetics of chasing versus attracting and the energetics of masculine and feminine energy. And really, how do we manage our energy effectively? And so let's start with that. When I talk about energy, what I'm really talking about is your vital life force, right? And like the level of energy that you have, whether it's a very low level of energy or a very high level of energy, like that's how much life force that you have access to. And if you're feeling low energy right now, like lots of love to you, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's a valid place to be, right? But ultimately, the maximum experience of life is to have access to energy, right? It's to have power. It's to have creative ability. It's to be inspired and excited about life. It's to be intending on things and moving towards those things. And it doesn't mean those things are always going to happen perfectly or exactly the way we think they will. They almost never happen the way we think they will, right? But there's a certain energy when I have an intention for my life, when I have an intention for my year, an intention for my relationship or for my career or for something I want to create. And I'm moving towards that. And I believe I can have that. and I'm connected to it, and that belief is alive in my body. And there's a certain energy to that is very vital, that's very life-giving. And then there are certain things we do, certain, maybe bad habits or misunderstandings or fear-based beliefs that we might be operating from that actually drain our energy. Right. And so there are certain ways of operating that give us energy, that give us vitality, that motivate us, that inspire us, that make us excited about our lives and excited about the future and excited about what's possible. And then there are certain ways of operating that drain that diminish that, right? They literally steal our life force. And in the context of today's episode, where I'm talking about how to stop chasing and start attracting, let's start there. The energy of chasing is an energy that drains my life force, right? It drains my vitality. The energy of chasing is exhausting. It depletes my vitality, my life force, my hope, my excitement, my inspiration. And attracting, which we're going to talk about some of the nuance or science of attracting today, but attracting is an energy that gives me vitality, that gives me life force, that makes me inspired, that makes me excited, that makes me connected, right? And so we want to look at whenever we find ourselves chasing, and I think we'll talk about this today, right? But I think there's a difference in chasing and pursuing. And I'll circle back to this, but I want to just say something about it right now, is the difference between chasing and pursuing. Chasing is driven by the fear that I can't have something, but I want it, right? So I want something, but I'm afraid that I can't have it. So I'm kind of frantically and manically chasing after it, right? And the underlying belief about myself or about life or about the thing that I want is that I can't have it. So there's a desperation energy to chasing. If that makes sense, just tap that hard a few times, right? Chasing has that desperation energy, like I'm afraid it won't work, or I can't have it, or it's not going to happen for me. And so I'm kind of desperately grasping at it. Whereas pursuing is a masculine action. And we're going to talk about masculine and feminine energy today, right? Pursuing is a masculine action. That doesn't mean women never do it. Sometimes women need to pursue things in their lives, right? But it is a masculine action, but it's driven by an underlying confidence, right? Pursuing is driven by the belief in myself that I can have it, that it is possible, that it is attainable, that it is available to me. And so when I'm pursuing something, I am taking calculated action towards an intention or a desire that I have, but it's driven by an underlying confidence, whereas chasing is driven by an underlying fear. And I'm going to circle back to that. But the reason I wanted to put that out at the front of this episode is because attracting something doesn't mean we're completely inactive. When we are in the process of attraction, right? I tend to think of attraction and creation as two sides of the same coin, right? Attraction is the inactive part where I prepare myself, I set my intentions, I'm patient, I'm waiting for the opportunity to arise. But then there's creating, which is active. And creating is when I seize that opportunity. Creating is when I move towards it, right? So pursuing falls into the domain of creation. But I wanted to start today with a quote from Jesus, actually. And if you're Christian or not, it doesn't matter. I think this quote is so applicable to everybody. But it's a quote from Jesus, and I find this quote to be so profoundly true and such a beautiful quote. And this is what he says. He says, "To everyone who has, more will be given, and they will have abundance. But from the one who has not, even what they have will be taken away." And again, if you're Christian, then you're probably vibing with this all the way. If you're not Christian, it's totally okay. I wouldn't identify as a traditional Christian myself, but Jesus, I think, is one of the greatest, spiritual leaders that has ever lived. And this quote is speaking into one of the most foundational spiritual principles. To everyone who has, more will be given, and they will have abundance. But from the one who has not, even what they have will be taken away. And so I want you to think about that for a moment. And I remember when I was in early recovery. I got into recovery when I was 21 years old. I turned my life around, got sober, all that. But when I was in early recovery, I remember one of the guys who was around, and I wouldn't call him like a mentor, but he was maybe, had a little bit more sober time than me. And he was, somebody I looked up to a degree. And I remember I was riding with him. We were in the car. I don't remember exactly where we were going, but he said something to me that always stuck with me. He said that, I believe that I have to take care of what I have now before God will give me more. And, whether you call it God or the universe or the essence of life or the organizing principle or whatever it is, I think it holds regardless of what your spiritual beliefs are. Is there's a spiritual principle in life that says I need to be impeccable with what I currently have before I will be given more. And this is something I found to be very true in my life, right? Like there was a time when I had very little. I have a lot more today than I used to, but there was a time when I had very little. And when I had very little, what my practice was gratitude for what I did have, giving what I could, being of service to others in whatever way that I could, being impeccable at my job, even though I was making $8 an hour, being impeccable at that job. Right. Like I had in my addiction and in my earlier younger years where I was irresponsible, I had like ripped some people off and accumulated some debt. And even when I was making $8 an hour, I made it a priority to pay off that debt. And the reason I made it a priority to pay off that debt and to pay back the people I owed, even when I was making $8 an hour, was because I understood the spiritual principle that if I want to have more in my life, I need to honor what I currently have. I need to be impeccable with what I currently have. And so the question I would invite everyone to consider when we talk about reclaiming your energy, when we talk about not chasing and attracting, the first question I would invite everyone to consider is, are you being impeccable with what you already have? And one of the most clear ways that I can illustrate this point, right, is when you wake up in the morning or anytime throughout your day. It's not just when you wake up, right? But throughout your day, throughout your life, do you find yourself more in appreciation for what you do have or more focused on what's missing from your life? I want you to think about that. This is a profound question. As you go through your day, and you really examine your thoughts and you examine your feelings and you examine your worldview and your perspective of life, are you spending more time focused on appreciating what you do have or focused on what you don't have and what is missing from your life? I want to go back to the Jesus quote, right? To everyone who has, more will be given and they will have abundance. But from the one who has not, even what they have will be taken away. So if I wake up in the morning or if I go through my day and I am focused on appreciation and gratitude and finding the seeds of joy in my life, even if maybe my life is small at the moment, if I am finding ways to be helpful and be of service to people, even if I don't have that much, but I'm still taking what I do have and using it to make the world a better place, Jesus said that I will be given more if I do that and I will have abundance. But from the one who has not. So if I wake up and I go through my life and then I'm always focused on, I don't have a relationship I want. I don't have enough money. This isn't working out for me. This isn't working out for me. This other person got the job that I wanted, or I was supposed to get this, but someone took it from me. And I'm always focused on that. What Jesus said was, from the one who has not, even what they have will be taken away. And so there's this spiritual principle. And again, Jesus said this, but he's not the only one who said this. This principle is a critical element in all abundance teachings that I've ever encountered, whether it's ancient, whether it's new age. This principle is like a thread that goes throughout all abundance teachings. Is that if I am focused on doing the best with what I currently have and finding joy and gratitude in what I currently have, I am in the energy of attracting more to myself. And if I am constantly focused on what I don't have, if I'm constantly focused on what's missing from my life, even what I do have will be taken away. Right? Look at it like this. If God or the universe or the essence, the organizing principle of life has brought something into your life and you don't appreciate it, then why would you deserve to keep it? And why would that principle feel that you deserve to have more given unto you? And I know this can be a confronting question. I get it. And there's no judgment here. I've certainly had ungrateful periods of my life. I've certainly had periods in even when I have so much in my life where I haven't been grateful for it. And I've had to be humbled in that. But this is a foundational principle. And when we talk about how to stop chasing and start attracting, this is a foundational idea to that. One of the most essential methods that we use to stop chasing and start attracting is to start appreciating what is. You see, if I am in a state of appreciation for what is, which by the way, I just want to point this out in terms of money, right? When money appreciates or when value appreciates, what does that mean? It goes up in value, right? There are these little clues hidden through our language even. When I am in a state of appreciating what is in my life, maybe every area of my life doesn't look exactly the way I would want it to. Maybe I'm wanting to invite in a relationship. Maybe I'm wanting to make more money. Maybe my relationship that I'm in is struggling and I'm wanting to improve that relationship, right? Or maybe I'm going through some kind of loss or grief or a breakup or loss of a loved one. Excuse me. Maybe there are issues in my family or whatever. Maybe there are issues in my work or my finances, right? But whatever the dynamic is in my life, there's always the opportunity to look at what I do have and appreciate it. And when I do that, I am in the energy and the space of attracting more. And there's always the opportunity to look at what I don't have or what's missing from my life. And when I do that, I am in the energy of not only not receiving more, but even losing what I do have. I've often spoke about this dynamic, and I want to speak to this for all the singles out there who maybe your vision or your intention for 2025 is to attract a relationship. And by the way, that's a very noble intention. That's a beautiful thing. You know, I'm married now, been married for a lot of years, but even before I was married, that was one of my intentions. And there's nothing wrong with having intentions for what you want to create in your life. But when you have the intention, are you intending it while appreciating what you do have? Or are you intending it while being obsessed with what you don't have? And there's a dynamic I've often spoken into that I've seen with many clients. I've seen it in myself. I've called it punishing yourself for being single. Those of you who listen to the podcast, you probably heard me talk about this before, right? Punishing myself for being single. And what it means when I punish myself for being single is it means because I don't have that partner or I don't have that relationship in my life, I don't allow myself to experience joy. One of the most certain ways to not attract a relationship into your life is to punish yourself for being single. I'm not going to start living until I get a relationship. I'm not going to start being happy until I get a relationship. I'm not going to start pursuing my passions or using my creativity or being of service to people until I have a relationship. There's this idea that when I get a relationship, suddenly my life will have meaning. Suddenly my life will be better. That the relationship is going to bring something into my life that I'm currently lacking. That's a really good example of what's in this quote. The one who has not, even what they have will be taken away. And so if one of your intentions for 2025 is to attract a relationship or create a partnership. Beautiful intention. That is a noble endeavor. That is such a beautiful thing to want to create and want to invite into your life. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But we've got to look at what is the energy of attracting. Thanks for tuning in today. And if you enjoy the Conscious Love Show, there are a few things you can do with just a few seconds of your time that will really support us in being able to continue bringing these messages to you every single week, completely free of charge. The first thing you can do is give us a 5-star rating on one of the major podcast platforms. The two most popular for this show are Apple Podcasts and Spotify, but you can leave a rating on any platform where you listen to this podcast. And if you'd be willing to take just an extra moment, you can write a few words about the show and share with people how it's touched you and the difference it's made in your life. That will go a very long way in supporting our show. Possibly the biggest thing you can do to support the show is share it with someone that you know can benefit from it. If you get a lot out of it, it's very likely that a friend or loved one of yours will too. And I appreciate it so much when people share the show. If you wanted to take the extra step, you could post a link to today's show on your stories or socials and help get the word out in that way. If you'd be willing to take just one of these steps today, I would appreciate that so much. And I want to say thank you in advance for caring about the show and being willing to support it. Thanks again for listening today. Your presence here means everything to me, and I hope you continue joining me each week for many years to come. Lots of love, and let's get back to the show. And so when we look at the energy of attracting, and I almost feel like it's redundant to say this because it's so, I mean, who hasn't told you to make a gratitude list before, right? So forgive me if I'm being obvious or forgive me if I'm being redundant. But gratitude is the energy of attraction. Now, me personally, I do my best to live in gratitude. I've never been one to keep a gratitude list. I've done it for a week here or there, but it's never been something that I've sustained. But the practice, and by the way, if you want to do that, I think it's a beautiful thing to do. But the practice of sitting in the moment and appreciating my life, sitting here when I wake up in the morning with a cup of coffee, and I did this before I was married, before I was a coach, before, just appreciating the life that I have and everything that's good about it. I mean, I remember I used to live in in the back of someone's house, paying $500 a month in rent, working in a phone sales room. And just my life was, I don't want to say anything bad about it, but it was a very small life. And I would get up at 6 a.m. every Saturday morning when I had the day off work, and I would walk 2 miles to the beach. I lived near the beach, and I would sit on the beach. And even though I had very little, I was very alone in the world. I had very few friends at the time, didn't have a relationship, didn't have a lot of money, was working a dead-end job. But I'd get up at 6 a.m. I'd walk 2 miles to the beach. I'd stop on the way and grab a $2 cup of coffee from the little corner store. And I'd sit on the beach with my coffee and just think wow, how lucky am I to be able to walk 2 miles to the beach? I remembered when I lived in Arizona, completely landlocked in the desert. I'm like, wow, so I was cherry picking from my life the good. And I don't want to sit here and pretend like I did that all the time. As I said, I've had definite periods of where I lacked gratitude. But that was an example in my life of how I cherry picked the opportunity and the gratitude. And I, like so many of us, and I'm going to speak into the nature of attracting a relationship here. And I, like so many of us, I really wanted a relationship. That's something that I think since I was young, I just, the idea of maybe it's because I watched my mom struggle in and out of marriages. I don't know, but the idea of having a really healthy, loving relationship is something that's been very compelling to me my entire life. And it's something I even remember being in 5th grade and just, I had my girlfriend, my little 5th grade girlfriend at the time, and imagining one day we would be married, which didn't happen. But But that was just, that's been like a heartfelt desire that's been in me as long as I can remember. And, and I met my wife when I was 26. We got engaged when I think I was 28. So I remember in my like early 20s and all those years leading up to that, when I met my wife, there was a period of time when I was very focused on the idea of getting into a relationship. Right? Like it was consuming a lot of my time. It was consuming a lot of my energy. And I was very involved in dating and trying to meet someone and trying to make it happen. And, there's kind of I had kind of a weird energy back then, because anytime I was around a woman, it was like, I'm like assessing, could something happen here? And even women I wasn't particularly attracted to, well, maybe she could work, or like, right. Like there was just a weird energy about it, because I was a little bit desperate for it. And at the time, not immediately, but as I got into my mid-20s, I got involved in some personal development work, and I started working for a personal development training company, and I was getting certified as a coach, and I was doing all these different kinds of things. And I remember I was sitting in a seminar, and some of you have probably heard me share the story before, but I was sitting in a seminar, and the woman who was facilitating the seminar, she said this, and it's just like, when she said it, a light bulb clicked. And I don't know, like, maybe I was just ready for it at that time. I don't know exactly why it clicked, but it clicked. And everything changed from the moment she said this. And what she said was this. She said, if you want a relationship, stop looking for a relationship. And I'm paraphrasing. She probably didn't use these exact words, but she said, stop looking for a relationship and start focusing on making your life as amazing as it could possibly be. And what's going to happen is somebody is going to see you living that amazing life, and they're going to want to be a part of it. And again, when she said that, it was like something clicked for me, and I was like, holy shit, like this is what I've been missing. I've been busy trying to get a relationship this whole time, rather than really focusing on making myself someone that somebody would want a relationship with. And from that day forward, and this was maybe 4 years before I met my wife, something like that. From that day forward, again, something shifted in me, and I just kind of lost interest in finding a relationship. Now, that doesn't mean I wasn't engaged in it when the opportunity presented itself. And in a moment, I'm going to talk a little bit about the dynamics of masculine and feminine energy and how this plays into it. So when the opportunity presented itself, I would show up for it. But the driving energy inside of me shifted. Whereas prior to that moment, my driving energy had been focused outside of myself, on finding something outside of myself, finding a person, finding a special partner who could make me happy. And of course, I thought I would make them happy too. And it wasn't that I was being completely selfish about it, but I thought that I could put my attention outward, and that could make me happy. When I heard that trainer, that speaker say that, and it clicked for me, what shifted inside of me was I stopped looking outward and I started looking inward. I started looking at myself, and I started saying, how can I improve my life? Now, this doesn't mean that I didn't date anyone or get involved with anyone until my life was perfect. Like, look, when I met my wife, my life wasn't perfect. Actually, when I look back at who I was when I met my wife, I think it's an absolute miracle that she gave me a chance. I really do. Like, it's an absolute miracle that she gave me a chance, because I had a long way to go. But I guess there were some redeeming qualities that that she saw in me and she took a chance, and now we're very happy. So I guess it was wise of her to take that chance. But it's not that I didn't date anyone or I wasn't interested, but what happened was my orientation shifted. I started to focus on myself. I started to focus on making my life a work of art. Making my life a work of art. And there was a trust that if I just focus on making my life a work of art, someone is going to see this work of art and they're going to see themselves inside of it, which is exactly what happened with my wife. And so rather than chasing something outside of myself, I shifted to attracting. Going back to what I said at the beginning, if you were with me when I started this, I was talking about the difference between chasing and pursuing. Rather than chasing things that I didn't really have any control of, I started pursuing things that I did. Right? I can't control who's going to be attracted to me. I can't control who's going to fall in love with me. I can't control when or how that's going to happen. But here's what I can control. I can control the action I take in my career every day and making the most of myself in a professional sense. I can control my physical health and well-being, going to the gym, doing yoga, working out, taking care of my physical body, getting a haircut, right? Making myself as attractive as possible within reason. I think people can go to an extreme with that, but within reason. I can control my spiritual growth, my intellectual growth. I can get smarter. I can get more wise. I can develop my intuition and my understanding of life. I can develop community around me. Which, by the way, I just want to say, if you're looking for a relationship, one of the most essential things you can do is stop looking to meet a special someone and start focusing on building community around yourself. So I got involved in my yoga community. I got involved in spiritual communities. For me, it was like, and this wasn't necessarily the driving force. The driving force was passion, actually, right? I actually wasn't thinking, where would I meet a partner? I was thinking, what are the things that are deeply meaningful to me? And if I follow the things that are deeply meaningful to me, and I build community around myself, around those things that are deeply meaningful to me, then it is highly likely that within these social interactions that I'm cultivating around things that are meaningful to me, I would find someone that I deeply resonate with. And so I got involved in my local spiritual communities. I got involved in my yoga community. I got involved in personal growth communities that were around. Here's another thing that I could control, that I learned to control. I improved my social skills. So I got comfortable when I was at a community event of some sort, whether it was yoga or whatever. I got comfortable walking up to someone and introducing myself. I learned some basic skills for how to strike up and carry on conversations with people. That's something I didn't know before. Right? It sounds basic, but if you don't know how to do this or you're not comfortable doing this, then it's something to learn. And so, like, one thing I learned was that, wow, people really like to talk about themselves. And if I just ask people questions, that's going to keep a conversation going. Before, I was so internally focused on myself that I didn't know what to ask, or I was afraid they were going to judge me, or I was afraid of looking awkward, or I was afraid of what they were thinking. And I would try to like tell them who I was. And then I was like, wow, if I just ask people questions about themselves and listen to what they say, I could keep a conversation going for hours. And so I started practicing that, right? I would be out in my community at events that, were enjoyable, whether it was a party or a yoga class or a spiritual satsang or something like that. And I would be at events. And then after the events, strike up conversations with people. Ask them questions about themselves, listen to what they say, reflect back to them. People started feeling heard and understood and seen around me. And that fostered friendships. And then from fostering those friendships, now it becomes like, hey, I go to this class, this satsang every Tuesday night or every Wednesday night. And then I've made a few friends there because I've been talking and interacting with people. And so after that ends, a bunch of us get out and we go get pizza together. And then what starts to happen is we have 3 or 4 of us who every week we go get pizza together. And then we start inviting new people, right? What started with 3 or 4 of us, now it's like 15 or 20 of us going out for pizza every Wednesday night after the event. And I just want to share this because this is actually how I met my wife. The way we had seen each other around because we were both involved in similar communities. So we had seen each other around, but we actually didn't know each other. We actually had very few interactions. And it was by being a part of one of these kinds of groups that I'm describing, where there was people were getting together for brunch one day, and we were on this group chat, and everyone's like, hey, we're meeting up for brunch. And I went and my wife went. We ended up sitting next to each other. We got to talking. We ended up spending the whole weekend together. That was the foundation of our relationship. But you see, that synchronistic interaction, that moment that where my wife and I sat next to each other at brunch and we struck up a conversation with each other and spent the whole weekend together and our relationship took off. I could say maybe I was lucky to a degree. We were lucky to a degree. But that moment was a culmination of everything that had led up to that. Right? Everything I've just been describing culminated in that moment. Going back to what I said earlier, that moment was the direct result of my commitment to making my life a work of art and staying true to that commitment for years. That moment was a direct result of everything that I had taken responsibility for. Everything I mentioned earlier, right? Growing my intelligence, growing my intuition, growing my career, growing my community, growing my social skills, right? Like had none of those, had I not been practicing any of those things for all those years leading up, that moment never would have happened. All of those elements were essential. And so what I really want to presence here is when we talk about stop chasing and start attracting, what we're talking about, actually, this is what's coming up for me as I say this. I'm just going to go with it. It's not exactly where I was planning to go, but I'm just going to go with it. What this really is about building confidence. See, there's a lot of discussion about having self-esteem. And, self-esteem is a weird idea because it's like the idea that we should feel really good about ourselves for no reason. And, Yeah, I do believe that human beings have inherent worth. I believe we should acknowledge our inherent worth. But we don't really want self-esteem. What we want is confidence. We don't want to just feel good about ourselves for no apparent reason. What we want is a confidence that comes from the human being that we have developed ourselves to be. Right? That it's a confidence rooted in competence. Because I have done this work and taken responsibility for my life in a certain way to develop my life into this work of art, that is where my confidence comes from. It's not some kind of ambiguous self-esteem that I just feel good about myself for no reason. It's actually rooted in something real. It's rooted in the human being that I have developed myself to be. And anybody who talks about attraction, when we talk about like relational attraction, it's a known fact that confidence is the number one most attractive quality. I said earlier that it's a miracle that my wife even gave me a chance given where I was in my life. And I'll say this, the reason she gave me a chance was because I was confident. Even though my career wasn't fully developed, even though my finances weren't fully developed, even though my living situation wasn't fully developed, I had developed myself enough in these different areas that I was confident, and that confidence was rooted in something real. And so when my wife met me, she saw that, okay, his life isn't completely developed in all these ways, but she could also see that my life was going somewhere. And it was something that she wanted to be a part of. Now, I want to talk about the difference between masculine and feminine energy in this domain. Feminine energy is attraction energy. Masculine energy is creation energy. And these are two sides of the same coin. Neither one of these are about chasing. Right? Going back to what I said earlier, the energy of chasing is a lack energy, right? It's rooted in fear. It's rooted in inadequacy. Chasing is something I do when I feel empty, when I feel lacking, and I'm grasping at things to try to validate or fulfill an emptiness inside of myself. But creation, or I used the word earlier, pursuing something, right? When I met my wife, I pursued her. And that was rooted in confidence. That was rooted in the belief that I could have this relationship that we have. I wasn't desperately chasing her, but I was pursuing something that I believed I could have. That was a part of creating the relationship. And so the feminine energy is the energy of attracting, the energy of receiving. It is the inactive energy. If we think about cycles, right? If you look at the process of farming or growing a seed, there is a time to plant. There is a time to let it grow. And there's a time to harvest. And then there's winter, which is a dead season where nothing happens. Right? You plant in the spring, you harvest in the fall, and then nothing happens in the winter. And so if we use this metaphor, a lot of us are trying to harvest when we haven't planted and the crop hasn't grown yet. So this is where, and the feminine is also the wise energy, right? The masculine is not, I don't want to say the masculine is stupid, but the masculine is not as wise because the masculine is not as reflective. The masculine is more power forward. Make it happen. The masculine is what goes out and collects the harvest when it's ready. And the masculine might also plant the seed. But the feminine is what sits back and watches it grow. The feminine is patient. The feminine is discerning. The feminine has a greater awareness that everything happens in a certain timing. The feminine is intuitive. So now I want to be clear. I'm not talking about men and women. We all have masculine and feminine within us. And in a relationship, I will say that often a man will take a masculine role, a woman will take a feminine role, and that can be very synergistic in a relationship. But that's not what I'm talking about right now. I'm talking about as an individual, specifically in the context of, say, you have an intention for 2025, and maybe that intention is to manifest a partnership or a relationship. In order to manifest this dream of yours, this vision of yours, it's going to require an appropriate balance of masculine and feminine energy. The masculine energy, unchecked by the feminine, is going to chase. Right? When that active energy, the masculine is the active energy, when that active energy isn't balanced with wisdom, with discernment, with intuition, it's going to chase. It's going to desperately chase. And so what this might look like is pounding the dating apps, just going on one date a week, no matter what. Like a lot of people burn themselves out with dating because they're approaching it in a very masculine way. I think the nature of relationship is very feminine, actually, right? Like, I think the nature of business is very masculine, right? Where you can set goals and you can set objectives and you can delineate clear tasks that you accomplish. And these tasks lead you towards a specific result. That's a very masculine thing. The nature of relationship is a very feminine thing. It's not clearly defined or delineated. There's a lot of nuance. There's a lot of feeling into, and when do I lean in? When do I pull back? When do I give space? When do I push forward? Right? That's all very feminine. That requires being intuitively connected. That requires being wise and discerning. You can't just power in. And whether you're a man or a woman, if your intention this year is to manifest a relationship, and I think the principles I'm describing here can be applied to many, many things, but I just use that as an example. If your intention is to create a relationship, it's going to require a healthy balance of that masculine and feminine energy within yourself. And so let's talk about the cycle of harvest, right? And we could say the manifestation of that relationship is the harvest, right? So if I plant the seed in the springtime, and I'm not talking about literal seasons here, but if I plant the seed in the springtime, that seed is going to grow throughout the course of the year. And then in the fall, I'm going to be able to harvest that. So planting the seed would be a masculine action, right? So how do I plant the seed? Well, I've talked a lot today about making your life a work of art. There might be a feminine aspect of that where you sit and reflect on what is deeply meaningful to me. If I want to go create community this year, what kinds of communities would I like to create? What kinds of people would I like to be around? What types of ideas or experiences would I like to explore? That's all very feminine, right? Reflecting, feeling into, intuiting, clarifying. And then once you have some clarity, there's the masculine action. Go do it. You've actually got to go out and meet people and interact and do things. And then while you're in the doing of all of it, Whatever that is, maybe that looks like, I gave a lot of examples earlier, right? But maybe you're working on your social skills. Maybe you're improving your physical fitness. Maybe you're improving your intellect, or maybe you're building community, or maybe you're doing all these different things. Well, as you're doing all these different things, right? So there's the masculine part of doing it, but then there's also the feminine part of being patient and trusting while you're doing it. I've seen it happen sometimes where I would have a conversation with somebody like this, or, be coaching somebody on something like this. And we would talk about this idea of making your life a work of art, right? Increasing these different areas of your life and increasing, all the things I've been talking about today. And somebody might say, I did it for 6 months and I still haven't met anybody. And what's missing in that, I did it for 6 months and I still haven't met anybody. One, you're kind of doing it for the wrong reasons, right? You're still chasing. You haven't shifted into the energy of attracting. You're doing all these things, which are, inherently good, positive things to be doing, but you're still doing it from a desperation energy. You haven't surrendered into the process of it. And so the feminine part, as you determine your course of action and you start taking that action, the feminine part is surrendering into the action that you're taking. Trusting that action. Trusting that I know with absolute certainty, I know in my soul, I know in the very depths of my being, that if I throw myself into making my life a work of art, that is going to attract everything that's right for me at exactly the right time. And so I lose the fear, I lose the desperation, I lose the clinging. I become open. I become available. And what emerges in the surrender, in the openness that the surrender creates, what emerges is actually like joy. We start to truly enjoy the process. When I met my wife, I wasn't desperately looking for anything. I was truly enjoying my life. Had I not been, she probably wouldn't have been attracted to me. There was an energy about me, even though, as I've shared today, my life wasn't in the optimal place it could have been. But there was an energy about me that she wanted to be a part of. And among other things, I think that energy was largely the fact that I loved my life. I loved what I was doing. I loved the people that I was around. I loved the way I spent my days. It doesn't mean I didn't have hard days or get down sometimes or have insecurities. I had all of that. Still do. But the overarching energy was that I loved the life I was living. There was also another overarching energy that I think is critically important, is that I wasn't attached to her. And I liked her. I authentically pursued the relationship. I got clear, like, this is an amazing woman. This is somebody I would like to be with. I'm going to give this relationship everything I had. And I did. But I also did it with the awareness that, you know what, if this doesn't work out, like, there are a lot of people in the world. And I had enough community around me that I wasn't in a scarcity of people. And so she felt the freedom to explore the relationship without feeling like there were these high expectations of her. And that's something that any high value person, man or woman, is looking for. When we meet someone, we want to experience in them the freedom to explore the relationship without expectation. We don't want to meet someone and start having feelings or developing a relationship with them and immediately feel like they are dependent on us for happiness or for validation or whatever, right? We don't want to feel that from someone. And people feel that. And when they feel that, they're either going to pull back or you're going to enter into some kind of codependent dynamic. Now, that's a whole other conversation right there. But going back to the topic, what I was saying about masculine and feminine energy. There is a time to engage, and there is a time to sit back. There is a time to take action, and there is a time to trust. There is a need to surrender into the flow of the life that you're living. And as you surrender into the flow of the life that you're living, you trust that that life, that energy that you are putting into your life is leading towards something. And you don't need to control and micromanage and constantly check in with when is it going to happen and how is it going to happen and why hasn't it happened yet? And how long am I going to be waiting for? That's all scarcity energy. You trust that I show up every day. I invest in creating this work of art that is my life. And as I do that, the work of art is going to come into being. And that, like when we look at a full, well-rounded life, there are a few elements there, right? Some degree of financial stability or financial success. For most people, it looks like having a loving partnership. Maybe not everybody, but most people desire that. It looks like having friends and community around. Often it looks like having children. Right? There are kinds of these pillars that would make a life an ultimate work of art. And we don't need to micromanage and control when the pillars are set in place. Our role is to work within the domain of what we do have control of, which at the end of the day largely boils down to self-improvement. Improvement of my physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual health. And so I want to say right now, as we close out this conversation, I want to say that some of you might have seen me posting about it, but shortly in just a few weeks, I'm going to be starting my next round of my 8-week Inspired Love Journey. And the Inspired Love Journey is literally a comprehensive process to balance and integrate the 4 dimensions of human experience, which are body, mind, emotion, and spirit. It is literally a process designed to bring about the transformation that I'm speaking about here in this episode. And so whatever your intentions are for the new year, if they're oriented around deeper relationships, if they're oriented around personal growth, if they're oriented around a greater experience of yourself, developing confidence, developing worthiness, developing your intuition, developing a greater clarity, a greater belief in yourself, a greater experience of self-love, a greater capacity for connection. That's what the program is about. And over the course of 8 weeks, I'm going to guide you systematically through this journey where we heal the wounded identity that has been created by our past. Right? We somatically release everything that's trapped in our bodies that's no longer serving us. We create a clear and powerful vision for the future. We look at the steps and the elements in terms of bringing about that vision. We balance the masculine and feminine energy within ourselves. That's what this program is about. And so if you're with me live today, if you're interested in joining the program, just shoot me a DM. I'll send you the details to get started. If you're listening to the podcast, I'm going to leave the details for the program in the show notes right below wherever you're listening to this episode. And the program's starting very soon. So it is invitation only. If you want to join, you need to book a call with us so we can make sure that the program is the right fit for you and that you're the right fit for the program. We don't just let people sign up on their own. It's an invitation only process. But if it is something that you think would serve you and you think would align with your intentions for what you want to manifest in 2025, there's not a better way you could start the year. And so I want to invite all of you right now to explore that, to take that leap. And if you're interested, again, shoot me a message on Instagram and let me know. I'm happy to send you the details there. If you're listening to the podcast, you can find the link to get started in the show notes below wherever you're listening to this podcast. And I would love to serve you in 2025 with this profound healing journey that we're going to go through together over the course of 8 weeks. So that being said, I want to thank everybody for being with me in today's conversation. I hope that this conversation has supported you in starting the new year in the best possible way. I hope it's clarifying some things for you. I hope it's giving you some grounding and some perspective on how you can approach this year in the most powerful possible way and how you can nurture what is currently in your life, what is currently present in your life, so that you can be the space to attract and invite more in. And that's my wish for every single one of you this year. So thank you for being with me today. So much love and blessings to all of you. I really appreciate you being on. Happy New Year, everybody. Lots of love, lots of blessings. Thank you so much for being with me today. And I will see you back here next week. Take care. Have a wonderful start to your new year. And I'll see you next week. Bye. Thanks again for checking out the show. Please subscribe on whatever platform you listen to podcasts on the most. And I would love it so much if you leave a review and tell people what you think of us. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram @TheLivingRelationship to connect more closely. And I'm grateful to be supporting you on your journey to love.